just want to say hello. Thank you for joining Chloe and I today on exploring how we at Sponge think about AI enablement and AI adoption, and more importantly, how to find your focus. And when it comes to AI adoption, you can typically think that this is a technology challenge, but our focus today is very much on that people-led AI adoption, because AI adoption, or even just general technology use, or even a new system coming into an organization, it doesn't happen when it's placed in front of someone. It happens when it's clear, people feel confident using it, and they're supported enough to actually use it in their day-to-day. But before we dive into all of that, I would just love to know, if you're human, you don't need to click on the screen. This is just, I know we get a lot of AI note takers, so I'd love to just see a couple of thumbs up if you're joining, if you're a human, an actual person engaging in this conversation, or just listening to us while you're taking notes. Thank you all for doing that. The reason that I really wanted to do this is I just want to highlight that this is very much a people challenge. We can't solve it on our own in a room or anything like that. We need to build our network, and we need to really understand it as a matrix challenge rather than just on our own. So we can't solve this challenge by ourselves. And our goals for today are really to highlight that, but also to help build a bit of confidence when it comes to the lane that you will sort of pick as your challenge. And these lanes help make AI adoption a little bit clearer. And as we move through each lane, we'll share what we're hearing from organizations, and the typical pain points and key activities that we would take as Sponge, and a couple of examples and resources as well. And we know that wrangling stakeholders can make AI adoption feel like, a bit like wrangling cats. So this webinar is really just to give you that strategic focus by choosing one of those 4 lanes that you and your stakeholders can really focus and unify around. But just want to say a proper introduction and hello. I'm James. I'm a learning experience consultant at Sponge. I've been interested in AI for a long time, and I came at it from a kind of niche corner of my life. I'll out myself as a massive nerd, but I was very much a StarCraft 2 competitive player, and Google created DeepMind's AlphaStar, where it's an AI that played the same game, and really seeing the system and how it responded to human interactions was something that really got me interested when it came to AI. And I've got a depth of L&D background and knowledge as well, working from freelance multimedia designer all the way to a consultant now. And I'll hand over to Chloe to give us a little introduction too.
Thanks, James. So also a learning experience consultant. Me and James are in a team called The Practice at Sponge, and there's a few more of us to boot as well. You might come across either before or in the future. So also a big AI enthusiast. I'm assuming that most people on this call are probably AI enthusiasts also, and just continue to be amazed at what it can do. Recently even provided me with some much needed emotional support when I thought I'd killed my fig tree. Just turned out I'd overwatered it. It was fine. Felt really dramatic at the time, but the ChatGPT kind of got me through it, and let me know I hadn't destroyed the whole thing. But anyway, I've worked in L&D for over 20 years now. And I think, through the roles that you can see on screen, I've seen the trends come and go. I think we probably all has, when you've been to like learning technologies and things like that, you see all the different trends coming and going. Probably showing my age a little bit here. But it's really clear now to everybody that AI is probably going to be the biggest disruptor of our generation. And I think that's like, we were unsure for a while, but we know it's here and it's here to stay. So yeah, I'm really excited to get into all of this with you today.
Yeah, and I think the key point here is that we're not experts when it comes to AI. We've used it, we've played around with it, we've embedded it in various solutions. But the main message is that we're people experts, really consider people enablement, focused on behaviors and how that sort of translate into everyday development. And when we're thinking about AI adoption, it really, the way that I like to think about it is it's not just the technology rollout. It doesn't sit neatly within IT or HR. It touches a lot of different facets that affect the way that we work day to day. And that's why I think it can feel so hard to get it right. It's not just a question around if people know how to prompt, or if they've used a piece of training or have a clear sort of AI policy. Those things help, but they don't necessarily carry AI adoption on their own. The bigger question, I think, is what needs to be true around people for them to use AI well, safely, and consistently in their work. So things like, do they trust the tools? Do they trust the guidance that they've been given? Do they know what good looks like? Do leaders even know how to talk about it and get people to align around a direction when it comes to using it? And for managers, I think it's particularly difficult because they need to create space for people to try it, but also deliver for the organization as well. And I think this is where L&D and HR have a very important role to play. And that's we need to act more as enablers, not because we need to own the answer or own sort of the adoption strategy when it comes to the various organizations that we work with, but because we can connect the dots, looking at things like the strategy, policy, workflows, skills, so that we can get these sort of connections in place to put together an adoption strategy or change strategy. And when we think about the challenge and how we've worked with various different organizations, we know that this is there's some real stakes behind it across global teams, regulated environments, distributed workforces, and trying to move quickly without creating unnecessary risk. And the reality is AI adoption is actually really messy because the challenge here is that it's not that organizations are doing nothing. They're actually doing so much. There's tools, there's various pilots that have been going on, there's a lot of policies that have been written, there's so much comms and leadership messaging and all these different pockets of experimentation. And this leaves people who are trying to use these tools with a very real question as to, what does it mean for my role? What am I allowed to do? And for managers, it's how do I lead my team with all of this sort of noise happening? And for the businesses, the very real question on that return on investment is where's the value in us bringing this in? So the challenge for AI adoption is really not where to start. It's actually where to focus because there's been so much that's been happening. And the way that we think about AI adoption is we use this model, which is our AI Enablement Map. And I think the simplest way to think about it is that most organizations, are struggling with everything at once, but they really need to focus in one of four very specific places. So as I talk this through, I don't want you to try and solve for all of it. I just want you to listen for which of these feels most like your situation right now. So first of all, we have raising the floor. And I'm not going in these in any particular order. It's just wanted to start here. And this is where people really just aren't using AI yet. There's a bit of hesitation, maybe a bit of uncertainty, maybe even a bit of fear about getting it wrong because they don't want to do something non-compliant. So the focus here is how do we get everyone into a safe, confident starting point? The second way that we think about this is raising the ceiling. And this is kind of the opposite problem, where some people are really good at doing things with AI, but it's happening in pockets. And I think a talk that I was watching is that you find your weirdos in your organization, how can we make that visible and make the rest of the organization benefit from all that innovation that's happening? So here it's more about turning that hidden progress into something that's more shared and scalable. The other way that we think about this is for leadership. And this is where leaders might support AI in principle, this top of house enablement piece, but there's a little bit of a gap about what's being said and what's actually happening in the day-to-day. So there's that miscommunication that's happening here. So the focus that we really want to emphasize here is how do we help leaders create the space, clarity, and permission for adoption to happen? And we'll touch more on each of these elements as we go through. And lastly is about front of house clarity. And this is one that I believe we tend to see a lot, where there's a strategy that already exists and there's already an existing tool set. But this is the question where what does this actually mean for my role? So here the challenge is about translating AI into those actual workflows and behaviors and really making it clear. But if you're not sure and you don't necessarily know which of these you sit in just yet, these are the kinds of challenges that we tend to hear when we talk to organizations about AI adoption. And you can see that it isn't just one neat problem. It shows up in things like people not engaging, teams doing different things, leaders unsure of how to guide it, or just a lack of clarity about what good looks like. And all these things can feel quite disconnected. And that's why we spent time to create this AI enablement map, because you'll actually see that these map to these different areas quite neatly, and they cluster into these patterns. So if you're looking at this and you're thinking, well, actually, I kind of find myself across all four, that's totally normal, because the goal here really isn't to solve all of these challenges. It's to find your starting point, give you that focus. So I'm going to run a very quick poll. So if you want to get your phones out, and Chloe's going to drop a link in the chat as well, just for this very quick poll to find out which of these is your focus right now. Where would you want to get started first? So I'll just give you a minute to submit your thoughts on here. And if you don't want to scan the QR code, feel free to drop it in the chat as well. Clarity, raising the ceiling, raise the ceiling from Danielle as well. Thanks, Chloe. And the next question is a little bit about confidence, because I would love to know, how confident do you feel tackling some of these challenges? So it feels like raising the ceiling, that's resonating with a few of you, front of house clarity, and a little bit of top of house enablement too. And you got a confidence score of about 2.6. Just go back. Yeah, raise the ceiling being the majority right now. And I think it's really interesting when we think about the context that AI is arriving in, because I think this is really important, because AI is not landing in a very calm, neutral environment where people are sat there thinking, oh, lovely, and another thing that I can pick up, a bit more change, there's so much happening in the world. It's arriving at a time when people are already carrying a lot on their backs. There's constant change, there's a lot of pressure to perform, there's uncertainty about roles, particularly when it comes to the AI conversation. There's just general fatigue when it comes to the sheer volume of transformation that people have already been asked to take on. And I think because people are already under that pressure, they don't naturally lean into the change. More often, they want to protect themselves from it, and they retreat into what feels safe. So if we think about, how they avoid doing the thing that might make them look exposed, when it comes to another change that's coming up. So when we think about what's happening in organizations, we start to see some quite predictable patterns. If people already feel isolated in their work, then AI can feel even more isolating, because it's just you and a computer working through prompts. It's already quite an individual task. And because it is such an isolating tool, it can be really alienating. And if people are already in survival mode, then experimentation is unlikely to feel attractive. It actually feels quite risky. And that's the thing when there's already low trust within an organization as well, that corporate messaging about AI can start to feel really disconnected from that every day. And if people are already overwhelmed, then even something that's genuinely useful can land as just another thing to deal with. And that's why I think this is such an important shift for us, because AI adoption is not just a technical problem with a technical fix. It's a human problem that's showing up through technology, because we don't want to just design for access. And if we do that, we miss the conditions that people actually need in order to use AI well. They need things like community, confidence. We need to build momentum to adopt AI or this tool into our organization. And I think for us, this helps us ask, where is the friction that's actually showing up when it comes to, people? And this gives us clarity around the problem. Is this a baseline confidence problem, or is it about scaling it? So, because once you can name that challenge, you can start to design for it much more effectively. And without all that in mind and that context, let's get practical. We're going to move through each of the 4 lanes and look at what that challenge sounds like in the organizations that we've been speaking to. And I'm going to hand over to Chloe to take us through front of house clarity.
Thanks, James. So how we'll do this is I'll take us through the lane itself, what we're seeing, and kind of how it's showing up in the work that we've been doing. And then James will take you through an example for each. So that's the kind of formula that we'll have for each of these. And again, they're not in any particular order. We're just going to work left to right, bottom to top, just to take you through these. So moving into the first one then, this front of house clarity. The pain points that we have here act as the markers that this should be a focus area. So if you think clarity, that might look like people asking, what does this mean for me? Inconsistency could be that everyone's doing things just slightly differently, might be along the same kinds of lines, but not quite the same. You've got fragmentation. So this is around different messages kind of circulating the business, different definitions. And again, that can lead to that inconsistency. And then you've got the applicability. And this is often the gap between the strategy and then that real world application. And that can often be the toughest one, I think, for all of those gaps that you can see there, those pain points. So this tends to be the starting point for most organisations that we see, and it can be tricky. As James was saying before, they're often already put things in place like a strategy, a policy, tools, training, and how to use them all functionally, but this can still feel really abstract. And this is what happens is when learners can react to this, it can be in one of two ways. So they might ignore it or just do their own thing. And neither of those ways promotes that kind of consistent, safe and valuable AI use. So what we can do is look at how we can create some much needed context in this lane. So first of all, translating the AI policy into real, desirable and tangible behaviours, defining an AI competency framework just to really show what does good look like, reimagining workflows by teams and roles and getting really specific. We've got risk and opportunity analysis by role. And I think with this one, we quite often focus on the risk and not the opportunity. And that can then lead to avoidance, and we don't want to kind of promote that as that negative behaviour. Defining sticky AI habits, and that kind of taps into a lot of the ones above, really, about how we can start to create this culture. And then team-based upskilling on consistent language and frameworks. We're all talking about the AI in the same way, and it just becomes, again, part of that AI culture that you're trying to percolate. So to reflect back, if you ask yourself, can people see how AI will be effective in their roles? And the answer is no. Then this could be your, lane of focus that you want them to focus on first. So I'll pass back over to James now with that client example that I mentioned.
Thanks, Chloe. And yeah, this all sits under the banner of contextualization. And with this particular client, which was a B2B SaaS organization, they had a really clear ambition. The strategy there was, making sure that they had clear AI messaging for their customer-facing teams to be able to speak more confidently about it, but also to understand it internally as well. So there was very much a two-pronged approach here to really understand it, for them to own the explanation, because ultimately they were a sales technology company that needed to onboard people onto this AI-enabled sales platform, and also understand it internally so that they could, explain it really clear. Because if they didn't own the message and they were just reading off sort of bullet points when it came to what it means to use AI within their tool, it just didn't land very well. So our focus here was really to understand the different roles that we were working with within this within the sales team and this customer-facing team. So we went down specifically into each of the different roles, and you've got an example here from our AI fluency heat map. So this is how you might do it if you were thinking from an organizational level. And once we had mapped out the various roles, we named the current state. So what does it mean to use AI in this team now, and how are they talking about AI as well to their customers and their clients? Then we went and focused on the opportunity. What does it mean for them to work really well with AI? What's the sort of moonshot that we could be working towards and build the behaviors around that? And that's that piece around building that practice around these real moments. Because ultimately what we did once we defined and created our capability framework when it came to sort of AI fluency, we built a really robust learning journey throughout it, where we used an AI coach for them to practice their sales messaging and their pitches, but also to create some really tangible pieces of learning throughout, which I think we split out into four different modules. And ultimately, to make it stick, manager enablement was really important here. So we created a cascade pack for managers to keep the conversation going and to keep the definition of AI fluency that we had defined, upfront, and also for them to evolve over time as things change. So ultimately, it's about being flexible. And lastly, just create this one-to-one manager piece where they would be able to, keep that conversation. But I think the main thing here is we didn't define AI fluency once, is that we define it many times by role. So we work through this sprint canvas, for example, where we started with the current state, what it means for them now, moving into the opportunities. So how can we move towards a more transformative level of using AI, for example, the benefits to the organization. So thinking about your sales leaders, how can we show the value to them? Some of the barriers to adoption, some of these things that about permission or not necessarily wanting to use AI within the team because they are worried about perception. So yeah, just really exploring some of those barriers there, ultimately enablers, and being really clear in terms of the first 30-day action for this team as well, which is where we started to build out our learning journey. And I think the thing here when it comes to behaviors is you got to get really specific. Because if you think, oh, we need more AI adoption or we need to use the tools more, you really need to be focusing on, Chloe. You really need to be focusing on, what's happening today. So, for example, if you're thinking about a learning designer, they might be using AI to help draft content for a module, but it's not necessarily, really clear for them and their stakeholder because they're generating it. It's quite an isolating thing. So the future state that we would want for them to use is maybe use a tool like Loop, which is in the Microsoft environment, to collaborate with their stakeholder and generate with them. And that ultimately is the sort of daily activity that we would want for them to do, is for them to get really sure when it comes to these stakeholder sort of conversations. So actually, it's not about AI adoption, it's more about building collaboration. So that's where you get specific and start to uncover the actual human behaviors that you want to change as well. And if this is your lane and you're thinking, yeah, this is definitely where I want to start, because I saw a few of you were highlighting that earlier, the first thing I would like for you to do is start by defining 3 to 5 role-specific AI behaviors for your team or for another team. And that will help give you clarity and at least a starting point when it comes to this lane. And I'll pass it over to Chloe to talk through top-of-house enablement.
Yeah, apologies, I get a little bit of feedback on mine, so I have to choose the time that I go back in with my unmuting. So yes, we're going from left to right now across to our second lane, top of house. And this is all about the role that leadership plays. So looking at this, leaders are often, I think, like the tip of the spear when it comes to providing the direction for the business, but we forget that they're figuring things out just the same as everybody else. And that can look like uncertainty in role modeling effective AI behaviors, setting expectations for the team, fear of making the wrong call and that kind of leading to a lack of action, and then hiding behind that risk piece that I mentioned before, and that can then be the reason for the inaction as well. And the question here is the ambition in the strategy clear for leaders to articulate, or is it not, and is it stalling out? Maybe the message doesn't translate. Is there psychological safety to question that message in the strategy, or does it feel so lofty and far away that it's hard to grasp? So the questions here is there leadership readiness? Are they acting as role models? Are they setting those clear expectations? And the activities that we can do to create this readiness would be to bring adoption closer to the flow of work, to make it real day to day, just as James was saying before, getting like that specificity. And there are definitely, as you'll see as we go throughout this, definitely some kind of commonalities between all 4 lanes. It's just a different lens, I guess, that we're looking at a lot of these things in. Leading from the front lines, like modeling, experimentation, that kind of orchestration that we want from leaders. Change management upskilling, because this is huge change and our leaders equipped for that change. Teams-based AI charters that can help create that way of working for everybody, that we all know our roles and responsibilities. And going back to psychological safety, leaders being really transparent to be able to create the trust again that allows for that questioning of the strategy and that articulation and that conversation to take place. So all of these things might not be that glamorous, but they're real practical and tangible things that leadership can do to create that connection from a strategy on a slide to what it actually means for their teams. And if leaders aren't already doing this, you might want to focus here. So here's James with another example to bring this to life for us.
Yeah, this has really come from us having conversations with various different leaders across all sorts of different organizations. And we believe these are the 5 skills that leaders need right now when it comes to AI adoption. So when we talk about supporting leaders, it's not about turning them into AI experts. It's more about giving them skills to create the conditions for adoption. And these 5 skills are what consistently show up when we sort of investigate AI adoption. First is psychological safety. And this one is really, really important because if people are afraid to try, there won't be any innovation. And what you really want to know is, do people feel safe enough to try and, get things wrong? The second piece is really about being a change leader, because ultimately this is a change management challenge. And are leaders able to navigate all this change and ambiguity and still keep things moving forward? And Chloe touched on orchestration earlier, and this is linked quite closely to psychological safety, but this is being really, really clear with creating space for teams to experiment and learn together, and creating these moments or even giving them challenges to focus on. Lastly is baseline, well, sort of, penultimately is baseline AI fluency, which is about giving confidence to guide these conversations and decisions, so that they have a baseline understanding of how it works. And lastly is coaching capability, and this is all about supporting people through the change rather than pushing it onto them. So being this sounding board for them to investigate this challenge. And if you look across these, none of them are actually about the technology. They're more about trust and clarity and creating space for people to adapt. So, if your challenge is more about how do we equip leaders to make this feel safe and useful, worth doing, this is definitely the place to have a look. And also, we created a resource all about AI adoption for leaders. And a really great example of this with a client is, really thinking about what are how we sort of create this for leaders is choose one of these 5 skills. You don't need to focus on all 5, just focus on one. For example, you might choose psychological safety or orchestration, but the key is to be intentional about the behavior, and you can create an enablement day around it. And the piece that you want to do is bring your leaders around that skill where they can talk openly about what's challenging, share what they're seeing, and start to experiment together. And lastly, build community off the back of that, because one session alone won't change behavior. What creates change is that ongoing conversation. And this is exactly what we did with a client, which you can kind of see in the background there, which was a leadership capability session where the focus wasn't on slides or content. It was about creating space for leaders to connect, reflect, and build capability together. And this was through an immersive real-world experience to build that community and excitement around that particular skill we were trying to develop. In this case, it was empathy, and also there was a little bonus trip to the aquarium as well. So if this is your lane, what I would like you to do is start by getting time with your leaders on what good AI use looks like in their teams. Start getting the conversation going and be specific about it as well. And over to Chloe.
So this lane is raise the floor, and this is all about bringing everyone along, as James mentioned before. And it matters because in most organizations, AI adoption isn't stalling because the strategy is unclear or the leaders aren't ready. Sometimes it's because there's a large group of people still standing on the edge of it, on the precipice, and they're unsure where to start, unsure what's safe, and afraid that they might already be behind. So it's like, oh, do I even dare go for it? So the pain point here is that what you might see in your general population, and you could have outliers to this, but generally speaking, this should be a focus area for you. If you see that people are hesitant, unsure, or afraid of getting AI wrong, if you're seeing that as a behavior, AI policy might exist, but doesn't translate into that confident action of people actually doing something with it. The messaging might be fragmented or inconsistent when it comes to AI. Again, we saw that in the other lanes. So again, you can see how some of the same pain points are coming up, but in different places. But people also know don't know what's safe, where to start and where to end. Like what's the remit, what's the parameters that they're working in. And this lane is often misunderstood as resistance. So people might say, oh yeah, they just don't want to do it. And this might not be the case. It could be apprehension, hesitation. So how do we create that first and useful step to enable that? So clear expectations for what AI fluency means to your organizations. I mean, I think we talk about clarity an awful lot in this, and it can't be kind of underestimated how much clarity can bring to everybody. Practical guidance that turns the AI policy into that kind of first safe steps. And this might be like within a playbook or something like that, where you can see those practical things that you can try to begin with, to kind of those tentative steps into AI. And this ties into like low pressure use cases as well, connected to everyday work. So you kind of remove the risk, like here's something that's safe to try, just to dip your toe into this. And then once they've done that, that's a stepping stone into other things. Messaging that meets uncertainty with honesty and clarity, building that psychological safety again that we saw in leadership. So again, you can see clarity coming in there, the honesty, that psychological safety. There's so many commonalities across these. By fixing one, you might inadvertently fix some of the others. Scalable awareness and activation campaigns. And I think with this, again, the crispness of the message is so, so important. I can't kind of say that one enough. And then team-based prompts, examples, practice moments, give them that team toolkit that they've got to, go and try things out. So awareness, and I think, confidence to have a key part to play in this lane. And again, here's James with another example to bring this to life.
Chloe, and this is with a professional services client, and we very much define the behaviors here. Again, as I mentioned, like in front of house clarity, behaviors are so key. But for this particular client, they really wanted to know, what does responsible AI use look like, and what does it mean to them as an organization? So what we created here was a AI maturity map, which is looking at the various roles and various teams within the organization, and what does it mean for them to use AI really well, or if they've adopted AI well, what does the use case look like, and how are they acting responsibly with AI, all the way to those who were complete detractors and didn't use AI at all. As well as looking at their policy, guidance, and looking at the governance that was already in place. And this all helped us define what responsible AI use even meant for this organization. Once we created that maturity map, it gave us a really clear guidance to create the learning journey. And for this particular client, we created a high concept sort of upskilling program. This was built in articulate storyline, and we did a little bit of a back to the future moment, where we took them back in time after the professional services organization had a bit of trouble in the news, and the challenge for them was to go and rebuild their responsible AI policy. And we also had a little callback to Clippy with their own version, Snippy. So yeah, very much creating something that was memorable and sort of sticky in when it came to the learning. But I think when it comes to this lane, it's very so it's very quick to think like, oh, we just need people to use AI more. And that's where organizations might actually create the wrong behavior. And you might have seen it online, terms like token maxing, where people are more prioritizing on using the tool than actually using it valuably. And those signals can be useful, but they can become dangerous if we turn them into a target. And that's where this law on the screen here, Goodhart's law, which when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to become a good measure. Because if people here use AI more, they may optimize for that activity rather than the value. Because they're feeling like, oh, I just need to use AI. So they're not necessarily really understanding it. And it's more of a shallow adoption than something that's valuable for the organization. So if you feel like this is your lane and this is the one that you want to tackle, what I would love for you to do is to just start by identifying one simple task where everyone can try AI. It could be something as simple as doing, getting a weekly summary and doing it in the style of a comedy roast, which Copilot decided to throw at me one week, which was absolutely hilarious. Not useful, but quite funny. So yeah, find something like that you can bring and get people used to using the tool. And I'll pass over to Chloe for our final lane.
It's that kind of like a gateway into it, isn't it, that we need to create. Lovely. So yes, our last lane, raising the ceiling. So in many organizations, the problem isn't that no one's using it. It's often that the most useful AI practice is hidden in pockets. So it might be that there's a few people moving quickly, experimenting with prompts, building their own workflows, finding shortcuts, improving outputs, and learning what does and doesn't work. But that learning isn't always visible, shareable, repeatable to the wider organization. So there's like magical things happening, but nobody knows about it. So you might feel this lane is your focus if experimentation has been really tentative in those small pockets and has kind of represented that siloed work. There might be champions and early adopters that are lacking structure or support. So you might have people that are asking for that support and that framework. There may be that the use cases are not visible, tested, reusable. So things are happening, but it works for that department and there isn't any idea of how to scale that in the business. And teams are effectively, with all of this, duplicating effort instead of learning from one another because of that siloed behavior. So this lane would be about enabling those unofficial leaders in the business, those weirdos, as James was saying, who have a passion for AI and want to elevate the business. And they need the support to do that. And, it's a team sport. You need to help them find their people. And so to do this, we need to have a really clear view of who is already creating value with AI. We need to champion the innovation. Oh, could you just move me on, please, James? Champion the getting distracted with chatting. Champion-led innovation sprints around real workflows, and this is where it can't be theoretical. It needs to be practical. I think that's again a theme that we've seen throughout all of this. A simple method for capturing use cases, risks, and outcomes. Keep that really nice and slim, lightweight, so it's easy to use. Communities of practice with shared goals, not just enthusiasm. I think we've seen it many times where it's like there's maybe a working group where everyone's talking the good talk, but there's a lot of talk and not much do. So it's really having that focus on outcomes. Evidence-based loops to decide what to try, adapt, scale, or stop. And trainer support for champions to carry that momentum locally, so give them the tools to take that back and spread that good word. So this all needs to be super tangible, have momentum, and James is going to bring this to life again for our last one.
Yeah, so very much about this pockets of innovation piece, and I believe we're all guilty of this. I think everyone has a Teams channel that might look something like this. This is the Sponge AI Playground, and it's maybe not the most active channel in there. There might be some good things that people have posted, some prompt share, but not necessarily the most active. And I think that's because we don't necessarily have the space to do it within our roles every day. We need to do it more as a side of desk type thing. And that's not where you get, innovation. And for example, Google's a great example of this, where 20% of their time is spent just on personal projects. And that's where you get a lot of innovation. I'm just going to pick on a specific team within an organization. So something like support services. Within support services, you might have various different teams: HR, IT, legal, marketing, and finance, and they all might have pockets of AI innovation happening. IT might be streamlining the way that their tickets come in. HR, when it comes to L&D, drafting content, marketing as well. And there's actually quite a few links that happen across them, and they're happening siloed. And as I mentioned earlier, this is where we need to be enablers. We need to draw these links together. And that's the great thing about being in L&D and also being in Sponge, is that we're able to be the objective view from up above, and we can see where these silos are happening, and we're able to draw the lines. And I always think about L&D. I know if you know me, I'll have referenced this before, those books where you get a cross-section of a castle or the Titanic or something. I feel like L&D gets this really good cross-section of an organization. So that's why we need to act as the enablers. But if you're feeling this is your lane, what I would love for you to do is just define what innovation means for your team before you bring AI into the conversation, before you even think about, using an AI tool. What does it mean to be an innovator? Because I always think back to when I was learning about science, and science is just goofing around until you write it down. So you need a methodology around it. So, get your weirdos to write it down. Otherwise, they're goofing around, So with all that in mind, I would love to know, now that you've seen the lanes in practice, have you switched lanes? And which lane is resonating for you right now? And how confident do you feel? So I'll just give you a couple minutes before we wrap up, just to get your thoughts here. Chloe, thank you for dropping the link in. Nope, sticking to the same lane.
It's that stick or twist moment, isn't it? Oh, we've got some people that have decided to jump over.
Yeah, it looks like.
Yeah, and the next question asks you which lane you might have moved to. So it'd be great to see of those people that have said yes. Oh, we've got a movement over towards the top of house, and also moving into raise the ceiling as well. That's the direction.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Oh, and hooray! I was so relieved that the number's gone up. So really glad that we've been able to give you some confidence today. James is going to share, will give you even more confidence. But some main things that we want to leave with you today, mindful that we've got 2 minutes, so we'll try and be really, really quick. So first of all, just to wrap up, start with the people. So AI adoption is not just about whether people have access to the tools, it's about the support around them, whether they understand what's expected, whether they feel safe enough to ask questions, whether leaders are creating the space for experiment, whether the right people are connected across all those departments that James is just showing you. So that's, start with the people. That's the most important part. Then find your focus, spend the time on the problem. All of the work that we've been talking about today hopefully should help you with this. So it's really easy to jump to the answer. And I think in L&D, we're a bit guilty of jumping to solutions. That's kind of where our mind wants to go. But content will only work if it matches the friction points. If people don't know where to start, you might need to raise the floor. If strategy has not reached the workflow, you might need to have that front of house clarity. If useful experiments are hidden in pockets, you need to raise the ceiling. And if leaders are supportive but not creating the right conditions, then you need to look at that top of house enablement. And then finally, ending with people, start with people, end with people. We need to design for that connection and build the case for better work. That's ultimately, the goal that we're aiming for here. That provides that true value back to the people and the business. And the strongest case that we can provide here is not that we need to have people to use AI more. It's more that it it needs to automatically mean more value. And I'll pass back to James for the final thought that we might be able to get in 20 seconds or so.
Yeah, if I can steal 2 minutes of everyone's time, it is don't fund AI activity, fund better work. when it comes to thinking about the challenge of AI adoption, ultimately, it's about making our lives easier. And if you need to make this case internally, I would put it in this way. We need to invest in people conditions that turn AI access into better decisions, faster workflows, safer practice, and clearer business value. And I believe that the next advantage will not come from having the most advanced AI tools. It will come from having the best operating model around AI. So really clear workflows, really strong guardrails, and the conditions for people to keep learning as the technology changes. So with all that in mind, just want to say that we're here to help. We have some lovely resources that we've curated as well about change management, all about the elephant and the rider, mobilizing Generation Num, so very much, the context of where this is happening, and the AI Fluency Map as well, if you want to try that out in your organization. And AI adoption for leaders. And as always, if you want to talk to Chloe and I, our LinkedIn profiles are there. And if you have joined this webinar in a couple of weeks, there should be a diagnostic tool dropping in your inboxes as well. So that's something that we built bespoke for you guys, and hopefully that is really valuable and you find that helpful. But yeah, just want to say thank you all so much for your time. Thank you for joining us on this incredibly hot day. Hope you're all doing well, and take care and have a lovely one.